Chapter 17 Novembro. It bore a resemblance to the childhood Guy Fawkes nights when Mum used to lay out a buffet and Dad let off fireworks. These were memories of a time untouched by the chill of losing people I loved, but with Stephen, by really living again, those times were returning. A Mediterranean way of life. On the doorstep of the enchanted wood, cities spring up from the earth. Their whitewashed villas with domed roofs are hurriedly constructed in the shade of broad tree trunks and surrounding lush lawns. The elves are wintering in our neighbourhood. On the forest floor, and more sheltered at the base of fallen or felled logs, fungi are displaying modifications of their customary shape. The red toadstools require only splashes of white paint to fulfill their fairy tale potential, while others are more phallic in design. But whatever form they take, the array of colour is spectacular. Now is the time to bash olives from the trees. When Stephen and I had first arrived in our village, the apparent lack of oliveira surprised us. But it was only that during the previous Novembers and the first months of living here, the elongated, dusty green leaves and gnarled limbs of the olive trees had been unable to compete visually with the colourful, eye-catching displays of oranges and lemons. Since we had been shown one oliveira, however, we saw them everywhere. Some stood on land we viewed from our veranda, others in a grove of some 30 odd at the side of the path we walked in the forest, and we spied yet more in fields and on ploughed terraces on the edge of Miranda de Corval, still retaining a grandeur amongst the town development. Another tree also offers its fruit at this time, and one morning the Major rattles our gate. In his hand he has three objects neither Stephen nor I have seen before. The shape and size of the fruit is similar to a beef tomato, and our neighbour's advice that the three he extends towards us need to be left on the windowsill for a day to ripen appears to confirm our guess. Stephen attempts to clarify the item's identity with the Major and is told that they are not tomatoes. We let the matter drop after giving our thanks, and later that day, when Lou pops in with some cakes and a bag of washing, she instructs us to split the skin of the fruit open and eat the honey-sweet, almost liquid, pale orange contents with a spoon. We did as instructed and liked the taste. Well, I liked it anyway, more than Stephen did. Home. Lou and Carlos left a few days into the month. As on the occasions that Joyce and Steve left their Portuguese home to return to the English one, a hole appeared in our immediate neighbourhood. For the vast majority of our first year in our new surroundings, the house by the font had been like someone you see every day on the train but know little about, a familiar stranger. Our relationship with the building changed following the months of cups of tea and cakes on its veranda. Memories of our little black and tan bundle being given friendship, comfort, and an old sheet she dragged around like a security blanket. Wearing scarves as evening's chill set in, but remaining outside drinking glasses of wine so that we could see the lights of Miranda de Corval shimmering in the cooling air, and rooms echoing conversations about our village and the generation of its former inhabitants we would never know. The stranger, who sat a little around the bend from us, had become a friend during the months its owners were here, and even after they had gone and the wooden shutters and gate hid her face from the world, to us the house remained our friend, and to Melina it was her second home. The land on which she tore around chasing birds, digging up moles and playing with fallen oranges was the playground our predominantly paved garden did not afford her. An unforeseen change following the departure of Carlos was Manuel T's closer relationship with us. I suppose it was understandable that the absence we felt when our neighbours went away was more like a void in the life of the older man who had bidden the now regular yearly farewell to his older friend. Yet the environment created by the interactions of old and new friendships had led to a deeper understanding of who Stephen and I were and how we fitted in. And there is little doubt that dynamics a playful bundle of fur brought to things helped too. Our acquisition of Melina had prompted Lou and Carlos to ask for doggy bags after their nightly meals out. And learning of this, Manuel T had also begun giving us the leftover food from his equivalent of Meals on Wheels. Our family was very grateful of the help in keeping them fed. The ducks enjoyed the salad, and sometimes we would collect the leftovers after stopping off at our friend's adega for a glass of wine, while other times we would bring the food bag along to us. Manuel T knew our house, or rather had known our house well. When he had been a younger man, he had come courting one of the sisters who lived here, and she later became his wife. Yet our home is not the home it was, and the functions and layouts of the rooms as they used to be can only be shadows within the stone shell. And it must have felt strange to approach a place with so many ghosts. However, Manel began stopping at, instead of passing by, our gate. And on one of the afternoons he arrived, Steve and I were building a new home for the ducks. Patrick and Patricia's house was no longer looking its best. After moving it lock, stock and barrel during the summertime and removing the base when eggs were being sat upon beneath it, although there had been no additions to their family, and size was not a problem, the structure had weakened considerably, and with winter setting in we thought we would build something more cosy for the feathered pair. We were struggling slightly with the construction, in part because we were reusing materials from the old lodgings, and frequent short showers were prolonging things further. So though we stopped and poured 3 glasses of wine when Manuel T arrived at our gate, we explained what we were doing and excused ourselves as we continued working. Stephen and I have our fair share of common sense and ingenuity, but the advice and help of someone who had been building, adapting and repairing animal pens since before we had even seen a duck was gratefully accepted. And with 3 sets of hands at work, the triangular duck house took shape and was completed just as dusk was arriving. Before the 3rd pair of hands left, their owner asked us if we wanted to go along to his place and have a drink. So we said we would clear up and see him after an hour. Patrick and Patricia were generally no trouble to shut away for the night. But as Steve and I started to walk them into their new shelter, they became anxious and only entered it after avenues of escape had been repeatedly closed to them. With the ducks away for the night, we took showers, and with Merlina on a lead that we had bought for her a couple of days previously, the 3 of us walked to Manelti's. Until now, whenever we had a glass of wine with our friend at his house, it had always been in his adega, under the 1st floor living accommodation, amongst wine barrels and cobwebs. We were surprised on this winter evening to find the wine cellar locked and the door to the main house ajar. Stephen called out, and the reply came back telling us to enter. And after stepping into a narrow hallway, we passed into a small kitchen. The room was basic but clean. There was a table just inside the door against the wall, and beside this stood a dresser with plates and glasses visible through the glass doors. Opposite the doorway, which we stood in, there was another that led onto a veranda, and the space between was dominated by a fireplace, which was lit with a roaring fire. We closed the door behind us while Manel pulled out stools from under the table and placed 2 beside the fire, and indicated for us to sit down. while a third was placed in the middle of the triangle, our two seats made with that of our host's little three-legged milk stall. Manel seemed taken by our puppy, and so did not mind that we had brought her along, and the three of us smiled as she sidled up to the hearth and lay her head on it, gazing into the flames. Melina was on her way to establishing yet another home in our village. The days that followed the building of the new duck accommodation saw them begin to sit in it during the daytime, but the evenings found us with the same problem. When we went to lock them away for the night, they would not go. We concluded that because their previous house had been an enclosure rather than just somewhere to sleep, they probably found the confined space a little frightening. When the ducks were younger, we had worried greatly about their safety from predators such as polecats, especially when it became dark. But after 8 months without any incidents, our fears appeared unfounded, and we made the decision to let the ducks take themselves to bed in their own time. The interaction between our ducks and our puppy changed over the passing weeks. The dog went from being a small, unsure-footed creature whose annoying inquisitiveness was often countered by Patrick's fierce protection of Patricia's fierce protection of her area and of her man, to an animal twice their height, and with the agility to turn on a sixpence. We saw no malice in either animal, but we did see danger. And though when Melina was the smaller, we witnessed Patrick using his size and weight to try smothering her, as the puppy grew, we were aware of potential injury or death from strong jaws and sharp teeth, even in play. Yet, in all fairness, Melina was a good dog, and could have been wonderful if I had been strong enough to chastise her more. My problem concerning our puppy was that I sympathised with her greatly concerning the bond she had lost with her mother, and her snapping and jumping up went largely unpunished by me, and undermined attempts by Stephen to bring some discipline into the equation. Even so, we all began to settle down together, and we found that along with being house trained, within a week, Merlina did not chew furniture, wires, or the carpet, being more than happy with the ample supply of wood stacked beside the fire or under the shelter in the garden. Stephen was undoubtedly tougher with the pup, but he was not immune to the softer emotions brought about by our newest family member. One afternoon, after Melina had been with us only a week or two, I was attempting to fit a draft excluder to the bottom of the door which led from the veranda to the summer room. The strip of bristles had a sticky surface on one edge of it, but I wanted to secure it further with a couple of screws. The door was aluminium, the drill bit I was using was for wood, and I was succeeding in making nothing more than a terrible din. During the cacophony of whirring drill and grating metal, below me in the porch the sound echoed around and around, and when Stephen stepped outside the kitchen to check on my progress, he almost stepped onto a bundle which shook and cried. The frightened eyes of Merlina looked into the anxious ones of my husband, and the two escaped to the more peaceful surroundings of Carlos and Lou's garden, where they sat until steadier heartbeats returned to them both. All Saints' Day, poppies and chestnuts. All Saints' Day came and went without us having any participation in that first year, and it was 365 days later when Stephen and I understood a little of the comfort it gave our neighbours. Yet during our first November living here, we saw cemeteries burst into a profusion of colour from flowers and light from candles, and whilst sitting on our veranda, we viewed friends smartly dressed going in groups by car or walking with memory as their only companion, to visit the graves of relatives and friends who had died but who for a brief moment were amongst us once more in the recalled stories of their lives. There are some dates, such as Dias Todos os Santos for the Portuguese, which are so ingrained within us that it is difficult to imagine them not existing. And yet, when the 11th of November approached, the little red and black paper flowers that I'd grown up with and as an adult always bought did not appear on people's lapels. Unlike Portugal, where there are national commemorations that celebrate the life of the 16th century poet, the birth of the Republic and the Coronation Revolution which toppled a dictatorship, in the UK we rarely celebrate our islands as one nation. Remembrance Sunday, respecting no one nationality and bringing together those of different religion, colour, and age to remember great sacrifice for principles which are above those differences, has long been considered such a day for me. And on this Remembrance Sunday, I felt homesick. In the absence of poppies, there was space for chestnuts, and these took centre stage at the Magusto celebrations, where the fruit was roasted over hot embers. Traditionally, glowing charcoal had been spread on the ground, and the chestnuts spread over them. But at the association, where we attended the festa, the copper-coloured nuts were put into something which resembled the drum ruffle tickets are pulled out from. These were the first chestnuts Stephen and I had ever tasted, and after gingerly peeling away part of the now blackened shell, taking care not to burn our fingers, we dug into the soft yellow fruit beneath, making it crumble to the palm of our hands. The sweetness of the chestnut surprised us and had a very un-nut-like flavour. We ate somewhere near as many as our neighbours and friends did, but being part of the occasion was for us more important than that detail. As had been the situation with June's festa, Magusto was an occasion that nigh on everybody in our village attended, and Stephen and I were introduced by Manuel to one former resident, the father of Pedro, our woodman. We did not have much conversation with Pedro Senior, but from what little we did have, it was obvious that the gentleman approaching his 90s had not left his faculties behind when he had moved into an old people's home a few minutes away. The evening passed quickly, and once again, resembling the sardine barbecue of summer, no money changed hands. But donations were collected sometime during the event by one of Manuel T's daughters. Accompanying the chestnuts was wine, which was provided by friends or friends of friends, and even in the middle of November, the evening chill was warded off by no more than a jacket and the simmering coals. Though not as biting as a British evening at this time of year, the Chestnut Festival bore a resemblance to childhood Guy Fawkes nights, when Mum used to make sausage rolls, cakes and sandwiches, which we ate whilst Dad lit a bonfire and we warmed ourselves and saw fireworks being let off. The memories of a time untouched by the chill of losing people I loved needed no visit to a grave in order to recall them or to pay my respects. Just the occasion of really living once again. Last of the season's bookings. A few days into the month, Stephen received a phone call from an old friend, someone he had originally been buying the flat with in London many years previously. Brian excused the short notice but asked if it was okay for him to visit in what would be a few weeks' time. He explained that he had been on the internet and following an idle inquiry about prices of flights to Portugal, had come across offers too good to miss. So without hesitation he had booked his flights over to see us. We were taken back by the request because we had not expected our come and visit any time invitation to friends when we had left the UK to be taken up without at least a suggested date before the plans were made. As it was, we had not quite closed our books for the year, and it happened that Brian's 4-day visit would come and go a day before my friend David's planned 5 days with us. Therefore, of course that's okay, we said. When I looked back on notes I had made throughout the year, I was completely surprised that neither of these friends' visits got a mention, and perhaps winter's enforced slower pace of life was timely for us. From memory, I know that the arrival of Stephen's friend brought Milo, not the stray dog we had cared for in the summer, but a malty chocolate energy drink that I grew up with. I recall also a drive up to the wind farm above Villanova, where this time, under the turning arms of the wind turbines, we collected pine cones for the lighting of winter fires. And Merlina accompanied us there on her first visit. Her little legs had tired after a walk up a long incline, and three of us had to take it in turns to carry her back to the car. Brian accompanied us on visits to Manel T and Manel J, where he could not believe that getting married cost nothing. After almost a year of living here, Stephen and I rarely went out for coffee and cake by then, but Brian gave little credence to our claims of a tight budget when we did just that during his stay. When David's time had arrived, we visited the castle in Penella for the first time, and it was during one of the longer walks we took Merlina on that we met one of the men we played the digestive biscuit game with on Sundays. After chatting in the street for a minute, José invited us to his adega, and it was here that we very much enjoyed a glass of our first locally produced white wine. Most memorable, though, it was during Dave's stay on an occasion when we were returning home in the car that we saw Maria walking along the road by the font. We had known our neighbour was finally back at home after a long absence in hospital and a convalescent home, but this was the first time we had seen her out and about since she had fallen in July. Souvenirs of the visit for our two friends were the hundreds of little needle marks in their hands and arms, made by the sharp teeth of a puppy that we all found too adorable to reprimand sufficiently. Betsy, almost the successful conclusion. Back in September, at the time we had requested the registration document for our car, we had been informed that this was not quite the end of matters because the procedure still required completion of at the Instituto de Registro și de Notariado Conservatorio de Registro Automobile, or something like that, for which we found details of its whereabouts on the internet. Being ever so efficient, we had attended this office a few days later, only to be told that registration would not be completed until November, and asked to return then and phone beforehand so as not to have another wasted journey. The allotted 6 weeks or so had passed, and it was I who had plucked up courage and called the automobile registration office. As I read out our car's details, there was some initial confusion over the identity of the vehicle due to my pronunciation of V's and M's. But it was established that Betsy's new identity was on the system, and later that day we attended the building in person and parted with our €50, smarting from spending more money from our ever-dwindling pot. It was with a week remaining till the end of the month that we attended the tax office to discover that the cost of legally putting Betsy on the Portuguese road would be, and what it was going to cost. Oh, sorry, let me start that again. Smarting from spending more money from our ever-dwindling pot, it was with a week remaining till the end of the month that we attended the tax office to discover what the cost of legally putting Betsy on the Portuguese road would be. It was going to cost us pretty much what we'd been paying in the UK. The car insurance we required once more at the brokers in Miranda de Corvo, where we had been told previously that they could not cover foreign registered cars. Proud that our old girl was now Portuguese, we smiled. The quote was less than what we were paying for car insurance through the Spanish-based company, but when we asked those insurers if a refund for the remaining 3 months would be possible, we were informed that it was not. After procedure, which had started in March, we finally had legitimate road tax, a valid certificate of inspection, had successfully completed the Portuguese registration of our car, and all within a strict framework that meant we need not pay customs duty. Yet unwilling and a little able to afford the cost of running two insurances simultaneously, we remained in a legally grey area, and the new Portuguese number plates which we had purchased remained in the boot of the car. We journeyed for a few more months with fingers crossed that our superficial British identity would detract official inquiry.